I got fined for letting water sit in my own backyard. Not a pond, not a swamp. A tiny above-ground pool, completely within the rules. HOA said I had to drain and take it down every single night. Meanwhile, the community pool's been under maintenance for 2 summers straight. You know what's funny? I didn't even want to live in a neighborhood with an HOA. That was my one rule when Ashley and I started house hunting. No HOAs, no gated fantasy lands, no little wannabe dictators telling me what shade of beige is allowed on my mailbox. Just give me a yard, a fence, and neighbors who mind their own damn business. But then we found this place. It was bigger than anything else in our price range. Good schools, nice street, long backyard with space for the kids to run around like lunatics and for me to maybe build a little shed or grill station. The listing said light HOA involvement, and I figured, okay, that sounds harmless. Just a couple of busybodies worried about lawn height or trash bins, whatever. I can mow my grass and smile at the old ladies. No big deal. Ashley loved the kitchen. The kids flipped out over the stairwell and the fact that they'd get their own rooms. And me? I saw that huge stretch of backyard and started imagining summer evenings with a cold drink and the sound of splashing water. I grew up in a place where you couldn't step outside in July without melting into your socks. So yeah, I had one fantasy, a little pool in the yard. Nothing fancy, not a full-on resort thing, just a circle of water, deep enough to dunk in when the air starts cooking your brain. We moved in right before school started that year. The HOA welcomed us with a printout of the rules and a branded coffee mug like it was a hotel. "We're so glad to have you join our beautiful community," the president said with this smile that didn't reach her eyes. Karen Whitmore, that name was going to haunt me like a tax audit. I didn't know it yet, but Karen was the queen bee of the Architectural Review Board, and what she lacked in warmth, she made up for in obsessive attention to detail and a weird vendetta against Joy. But back then, I didn't think much of her. I skimmed the rules, nodded a lot, and figured we'd never hear from the HOA again unless I left a trash can out too long or forgot to weed whack. The first summer came and went. It was hot, but the community pool was open, so we used that a few times. The kids liked it, even if it was always a bit crowded and smelled like the janitor's closet at a YMCA. We paid for it through our dues, so it made sense to use it. And to be honest, I wasn't in any rush to buy a pool anyway. Money was tight. Ashley had just gone back to part-time nursing after our youngest started kindergarten, and I was still getting my HVAC business off the ground. The next summer, though, the community pool never opened. They sent out some vague email about structural concerns and ongoing maintenance, like they were fixing a damn stadium. Neighbors grumbled, but nobody raised hell. It was hot as hell that year, too. Humid, sticky, mosquitoes that could carry off a dog, but fine. We bought one of those inflatable kiddie pools from Walmart and stuck it in the yard for the kids. Not great, but better than nothing. No complaints from HOA, no visits, no Karen. All quiet. Then this past summer came along. Another heat wave, worse than the year before, like cook an egg on the driveway bad. By now, the kids had outgrown the little inflatable thing. They were 9 and 6 and packed into that pool like sweaty sardines. I told Ashley, screw it, let's just get something real this year. I wasn't talking about an in-ground Olympic setup, just a normal above-ground frame pool, about 4 feet deep, 10 feet across. I looked up the HOA rules again, just to be safe. That's when I found it. Temporary pools must not exceed 23 inches in depth. I literally laughed. 23 inches? That's not a pool. That's a glorified soup bowl. Who wrote this? Someone with a fear of water. Still, I wanted to play it by the book. I submitted a request to the Architectural Review Board with all the details. Size, placement, fencing, pump, safety precautions, everything. I figured I'd at least get a conversation going. Maybe they'd grant an exception. Maybe they'd finally realize the community pool had become a mirage and let people take care of themselves for once. Nope. Denied. Not just denied, shut down flat in the most passive-aggressive way possible. The email I got back didn't even try to pretend like they read the whole request. Karen sent a screenshot of the pool rule and a one-liner. Not permitted per section 8.4. No greeting. No explanation. No offer to discuss alternatives. It might as well have said, go screw yourself, enjoy the heat. At that point, I was annoyed, but not shocked. I figured, okay, we'll go back to the kiddie pool setup. It's stupid, but it's technically allowed, right? I bought a slightly nicer one, 23 inches deep exactly, with a frame instead of inflatables, so it wouldn't collapse every time someone sneezed. Took me an hour to assemble it, filled it up, checked the filter, made sure everything was clean and safe. I even made sure it wasn't visible from the street, just in case Karen's binoculars were out. And for 3 days, it was perfect. The kids had a blast. Ashley said it felt like we finally had a little normal again. I sat out there one night with a beer, watching the sunset over the fence, thinking, damn, this is what we were missing. Then came the letter. Not an email this time, a printed letter, hand-delivered to our mailbox like some kind of legal summons. It had the HOA letterhead and everything. According to the letter, while the pool was technically compliant in terms of depth, it violated daily usage protocol and should have been fully disassembled after each period of use. They even bolded that line like it was something out of a federal regulation book. Fully disassembled. I had to read it 3 times to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. Turns out someone had interpreted the rules, maybe Karen, maybe the entire ARB, as meaning that even compliant pools weren't allowed to exist overnight. You could use them. You just had to take them down completely when you were done. That meant draining the water, disconnecting the filter, drying out the liner, and collapsing the frame every single night, like it was a camping tent. I've seen Army field units with less work. It wasn't written anywhere, not in the bylaws, not in the covenants, not in the regulations. I know that because I checked. I read through every section twice, had Ashley read it, even ran a few terms through my HVAC's legal consultant buddy who handles zoning crap. It was just not a rule. But they were enforcing it like it was gospel, and that's when I realized this wasn't about a pool. This was about control, and I wasn't about to spend another summer watching my kids boil in a plastic puddle while Karen Whitmore played sheriff with a clipboard. No, I was done playing nice. I didn't take the pool down. Of course I didn't. It was a 23-inch deep frame pool, not some inflatable thing you could roll up like a sleeping bag. Taking it apart every night would mean draining it completely, drying the liner, disassembling the frame, and then doing it all over again the next day, just so the kids could splash around for 20 minutes before dinner. That's not pool maintenance, that's a full-time job. And more importantly, nowhere in the rules did it say I had to. I read every line of the HOA bylaws. Twice. Had Ashley double-check it too. There was nothing about any requirement to disassemble a pool daily. The depth limit? Yeah, that was clear. 23 inches. I followed that. The setback from the fence? I followed that too. The cover, the filtration, the fencing, we did everything by the book. But apparently following the book doesn't matter if someone decides to make up new chapters. A few days after setting it up, I came home to find a yellow envelope in our mailbox. Not email, not a note, an actual envelope. Formal looking. Stamped with the HOA's letterhead like it was some kind of cease and desist from the federal government. Inside was a notice of violation. Apparently, I had committed a non-compliant usage of temporary recreational equipment by failing to disassemble my pool after use. They hit me with a $100 fine. There was even a printed photo of the pool attached, taken from a weird angle like someone had stood on a ladder or a truck bed to get the shot. That's when it stopped being dumb and started getting creepy. Someone, probably Karen, had gone out of their way to spy on my backyard, not just peek over a fence. They elevated themselves, literally, to get a shot of my kids' pool, on private property. I don't know about you, but if I tried to take pictures of someone's backyard where their kids were playing, I'd be in jail. I sent an email to the ARB right away, very polite, asked them to please point me to the section of the bylaws that required disassembly, said I'd reviewed the documentation thoroughly and found no such rule. I even included the exact language from the current documents and offered to jump on a call to clarify. No response. 3 days went by, nothing. Then finally I got a reply from Karen directly. No greeting, no signature. Just this one-line gem. This is an established ARB practice applied to all temporary water structures. Thank you for understanding. That was it. Established practice. No rule, no vote, no documentation. Just something they decided at some point, some vague, off-the-books interpretation of temporary, and now they were fining people over it. I don't even know what pissed me off more, the fine, the made-up rule, or the smug little thank you for understanding at the end, like I was the one being unreasonable for not wanting to tear down a pool every single day during a heat wave. I didn't respond. I just sat out on the porch that evening with a drink, watching my kids splash around, and started thinking, if this was their first move, what was next? Because let's be real, this wasn't about safety, this wasn't about property value, this wasn't about aesthetics, this was about control, and Karen Whitmore had just sent a very clear message. She was just getting started. After that fine, I did what any rational adult would do. I ignored it. I mean, I didn't light it on fire or anything, I just didn't pay it. I wasn't going to set a precedent by handing over $100 because someone misread a rule that doesn't even exist. I figured maybe if I let it sit long enough, they'd get bored and move on. Like, okay, he didn't cave. Time to go micromanage someone's mailbox paint or yell at a neighbor's flower bed. Spoiler, they didn't move on. A few days later, I came home from work and saw a neon orange tag zip-tied to our front gate. HOA. Courtesy warning. Which, by the way, is the most passive-aggressive phrase I've ever seen in my life. Like, are you warning me or being courteous? Pick a lane. This one said we were in continued violation and had failed to correct the issue as outlined in prior communications. They were escalating the matter. Their words, not mine. Escalating. And they meant it. Because 2 days after that, I got a second fine. This time for $250. Same violation. Just more expensive. No explanation, no conversation. Just more paper in the mailbox and a threat to refer the matter to collections if it wasn't resolved promptly. Collections over a kiddie pool. Ashley was livid. She wanted to call someone, anyone, a lawyer, the city, a reporter, her mom. But I told her to hold off. I wasn't done trying to solve this the adult way. Calmly, legally, rationally. At that point, I still believed reason could win. That if I just found the right words, the right angle, someone would go, oh wait, yeah, this doesn't make any damn sense. So I printed out the HOA bylaws again, this time highlighting every section remotely related to pools. I sent it in with a new letter, more formal this time, cited everything, asked for clarification in writing, copied 2 other members of the ARB, even offered to come to their next meeting to discuss the matter in person. Their response? A third fine. $500. I'm not kidding. They weren't just doubling down, they were tripling down, like this had become some weird power game and Karen was sitting in her kitchen with a glass of box wine and a gavel, gleefully adding zeros every time I tried to push back. And then it started getting personal. One night, we came home from a baseball game and found our backyard gate wide open. The kids had run ahead and were halfway into the yard before I realized something looked off. The pool filter was disconnected, the pump was unplugged, and the pool itself, still full, had a fresh slice right along the side, like someone had taken a utility knife to it. Water was slowly leaking out into the grass. I stood there just staring at it for a second, thinking maybe it was a raccoon or a really ambitious squirrel. But no, this wasn't an accident. This was clean, deliberate, human. That night I installed cameras, and no, I didn't call the cops, because what would I say? Hi, someone maybe cut my totally legal kiddie pool, and I think it's the HOA. Yeah, good luck getting that on a report. But the message was clear. If I wasn't going to take the pool down myself, someone else was going to do it for me. We patched the side the best we could. The next day, I kept the kids inside, and Ashley wouldn't stop pacing the kitchen like a caged animal. I told her I'd handle it. I just didn't know how yet. Then I found out they'd sent letters to our neighbors, not just about us, about our property. Karen had issued what she called a community quality assurance update that mentioned ongoing violations at specific homes, and while it didn't use our name, it described our house and yard very specifically. Mitch, the guy across the street, brought it over. He was pissed, said it felt like targeted shaming, like they were trying to drum up social pressure to force us into compliance, which of course they were, and it started working. Neighbors who used to wave started looking the other way. Conversations that once lasted 5 minutes at the mailbox suddenly turned into awkward head nods. People stopped bringing their dogs past our fence. One woman even pulled her kid away when he tried to peek into our yard. I'm not exaggerating when I say it felt like we had the plague. And the cherry on top? The HOA website got updated. Not the bylaws, just the FAQ section. And guess what suddenly appeared under pool guidelines? Temporary pools must be removed daily when not in active use. No date, no vote record, just there, like it had always been. They were rewriting history in real time. That was the moment I felt it, really felt it, for the first time. That pressure behind your eyes when you realize this isn't just annoying anymore. This is coordinated, strategic. It's not about pools or water or even the damn rules. It's about control. And they weren't going to stop. Because now it wasn't about what we did. It was about what we didn't do. We didn't obey. You ever get to that point where you start second-guessing your own sanity? Like you know something's wrong, you feel it in your bones, but everyone around you is either too scared to admit it, too wrapped up in their own lives, or just pretending it's not happening. That's where I was. Standing in my own backyard, staring at a busted kiddie pool, wondering how the hell a handful of retirees with clipboards had turned into this cold, invisible wall I couldn't get through. But I wasn't giving up. Not yet. I told Ashley I was going to try one more time. Really try. Not just emails, not just polite letters. I was going to knock on doors, call offices, get actual answers. Because as much as I wanted to rip up every fine and throw them on Karen's front lawn with a flaming bag of dog crap, I still believed there had to be some adult in the room. Somebody who could say, yeah, this is nuts. Let's fix it. So I started small. First, I emailed the city. I figured maybe they had some jurisdiction, over public safety, over how HOA enforcement works, something. The woman who replied was friendly, but she might as well have copy-pasted from a script. Homeowners associations operate as private entities governed by their internal covenants and bylaws. Basically, not our problem. Good luck. Go away. Fine. Then I talked to a lawyer. He was a friend of a friend type, someone I met once at a cookout and remembered worked with HOAs and zoning boards. I gave him the short version of the situation. He asked to see the actual HOA bylaws and the violation notices. After reading everything, he looked at me and said, "They don't have a leg to stand on, but that doesn't mean they won't kick the hell out of you while they're falling." He explained that fighting this in court was possible, but it'd be a drawn-out, expensive mess. He said HOAs thrive on the assumption that people won't push back, because pushing back means time, money, and stress. Most folks just can't spare. He was right. I didn't have a war chest sitting around for legal bills. I had a mortgage, 3 kids, and a busted pool. But he did give me a few ideas. He said if I wanted to make a stink without jumping straight into court, I could start with a formal petition to the board and request an arbitration meeting, file a grievance, demand a hearing with minutes, with witnesses, with everything on the record. They might ignore it, but they'd have to show their cards eventually. So I drafted the letter. Not angry, not aggressive, just direct. I laid out my position, backed it with their own documents, their own wording, copies of the original FAQ page from a year ago, highlighted sections of the bylaws. I added photos. I showed that the so-called daily disassembly requirement had never existed in writing until recently, and that even now it was tucked away in a website section that had no official standing. I asked for clarification, for transparency, for a formal hearing. I dropped it off in person, slid it through the little HOA office mail slot next to the rec center. I even waved at the camera on my way out, just to let them know I wasn't hiding. And then I waited. And waited. A full week went by. Nothing. Not even an auto response. Ashley started to lose patience. She told me maybe it was time to pull the plug. Literally. Drain the pool. Let them win. "It's not worth the stress," she said. "Not for this. Not for water." I understood what she meant. She wasn't wrong. But it was never just about the pool anymore. It was about the way they got to make up rules as they went. The way they expected you to swallow it and say, "Thank you." And then something happened that should have been a win. At least, it felt like one at the time. I got a letter from the HOA saying they'd agreed to an informal discussion regarding my concerns and were willing to offer a meeting with select board members to review my documentation. It sounded like progress. I showed up that night in khakis and a polo like I was interviewing for a job I didn't want. Brought a folder full of paperwork, copies of everything, including the old FAQ screenshots and email chains. I even brought a printout of that photo they took from above the fence just to throw it on the table like Exhibit A. The meeting took place in the little recreation center next to the tennis courts. Karen was there, of course, seated like she was chairing the board of a Fortune 500 company, glasses low on her nose, tapping a pen like she had a plane to catch. 2 other members of the ARB were with her, one guy I didn't know and a woman who looked like she regretted agreeing to be there. I gave them my whole spiel. Polite, professional, walked through everything I documented. At the end, I asked one simple question. Can you show me the rule that says I have to take down a compliant pool every single day? Karen didn't answer. The guy on her left looked like he wanted to say something. His mouth even twitched. But Karen raised her hand slightly, just a flick of her fingers, and that was that. He stayed quiet. Finally, she spoke. "We understand your frustration, Mr. Myers, but the board has determined that the pool in question creates an ongoing disruption to community uniformity. The guidelines as they stand reflect the intent of the original community charter." I stared at her. "That's not a rule," I said. "That's a vibe. You're enforcing a vibe." Karen didn't blink. Intent matters. I wanted to laugh, or scream, or both. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a negotiation. This wasn't a mistake they were going to walk back. This was on purpose. I walked out of that meeting with my folder still full, my blood pressure through the roof, and one very loud thought pounding in my skull. They don't care what's right. They care what's easy. And I was about to make things very, very hard. I wasn't even looking for a fight anymore at that point. I was looking for a way out. I'd tried being polite. I'd tried using their own rules against them. I'd tried appealing to reason, to process, to any flicker of common sense left in those weekly board meetings that smelled like burnt coffee and overreach. And none of it worked. So when the twist came, it wasn't because I was digging for it, it found me. Or, more accurately, he did. His name was Jim. I didn't know his last name at first, didn't even know who he was. He was just that quiet, balding guy you'd see at HOA meetings, sitting off to the side, never saying much. Honestly, I thought he was someone's husband, dragged there under threat of passive aggression. But turns out Jim was the treasurer, had been for years. And unlike Karen, he didn't strut around the neighborhood with a tape measure and a superiority complex. We crossed paths at the grocery store of all places. I was in the frozen section trying to decide between two brands of budget ice cream when I heard someone clear their throat behind me. I turned and saw him, cardigan, glasses, tired eyes, and he just said, "You're the pool guy, right?" At first, I thought he was about to scold me or ask me why I was destroying the moral fabric of the neighborhood with my inflatable sins. But then he looked around like he was checking to see who was listening and lowered his voice. "I'm not supposed to say anything, but there's something you should probably see." That's how I ended up sitting with him 2 days later at the back table of a coffee shop that smelled like cinnamon and printer ink. He brought a manila folder, and when he opened it, the first thing I saw was the HOA charter. The original one. Signed and notarized back when the community was founded in the early 80s. Jim didn't say anything at first, he just let me flip through the pages. And sure enough, there it was in black and white, clear as day. Recreational structures under 30 inches in height may remain standing if screened from public view and used seasonally. 30 inches. Not 23, not temporary, not removable. I looked up at him. "Wait, this is the actual document?" He nodded. The original, not the retyped version Karen had published on the website last year. "Why isn't this the version being enforced?" He sighed and ran a hand down his face like he'd been holding this in way too long. Because Karen didn't like how vague some of the old language was. She said it created loopholes and didn't reflect modern expectations, so she restructured the layout and adjusted a few things. "Adjusted," I repeated. "She didn't present it for a full board vote. She didn't file it with the city. She just uploaded it to the HOA site and said it was a modernization. Most of the board didn't even bother reading it. Honestly, no one questioned it. Until now." It took me a second to absorb what he was saying. They were operating off a forged policy. The whole daily pool takedown thing? The 23-inch limit? None of it was in the real charter. Karen had made it up, put it online, and everyone just rolled with it because she said so. No one cross-checked. No one asked questions. I felt sick. Not just angry, sick. Because I'd been fighting a ghost, a made-up law, an imaginary system that everyone treated like gospel because one woman decided she was judge, jury, and executioner. And then Jim dropped the real bomb. "She's been doing this for a while," he said. "Not just with you. Last year it was a guy who put solar panels on the side of his roof instead of the back. Year before that, it was a couple who added a ramp for their kid's wheelchair. She added wording after the fact to claim they were non-compliant. Fined them. Same process." I just sat there. I mean, I always knew she was power-hungry, knew she got off on control, but hearing it like that, in plain language, it stopped being annoying and turned into something else entirely. Corruption. Not the kind you see in courtroom dramas. The slow, quiet kind. The kind where someone manipulates a small system just enough that nobody notices until it's too late. Where the damage isn't measured in millions, it's measured in dignity. In neighbors whispering behind closed doors because they're too afraid to push back. I asked Jim why he was telling me this now. He looked down at his coffee and said, "Because I think you're the first person who's not letting it go, and someone has to." That was it. That was the shift. I went home that night and laid the original charter next to the fines we'd received, and I just sat there, staring at them. My pulse wasn't even fast. It was slow, cold, focused. They messed with the wrong guy's summer. Now I was going to mess with their entire system. I didn't sleep much that night. Not because I was anxious or wired or pacing the house like a maniac, no, it was quieter than that. I just lay there in bed, staring at the ceiling, running the same thought over and over again in my head like a looped tape. She made it all up. All those fines, all the threats, all the crap about pool depth and daily disassembly and community aesthetics. All of it was built on something that didn't even exist. A made-up rulebook. A knockoff HOA gospel. Karen typed up in Microsoft Word and slapped online like nobody would notice. But now someone did. I knew right then I couldn't just shove this in a drawer and pretend it never happened. You don't just stumble across a smoking gun and go, "Huh, interesting," and move on. This wasn't about my pool anymore. It hadn't been for a while. This was about everyone Karen had steamrolled, everyone she'd silenced with fake rules and that smug little "thank you for understanding" tone. And if no one else was going to hold her accountable, I would. But I had to be smart. This wasn't the kind of thing you blow up on a Facebook group or drop into the Nextdoor app like, "Hey y'all, turns out our HOA's a fraud." That's how you lose momentum. Or worse, how they spin the narrative and make you look like the crazy one. No, if I was going to hit back, I needed everything lined up. Facts, witnesses, paper trails, original documents, supporting voices. Something airtight. Something they couldn't wiggle out of with legalese or "that's not how we interpreted it" spin. I started with Jim. We met again, this time at his place. Real, low-key, no digital trails, no emails. He brought out his file box, and I'm telling you, the man had receipts. Literally. Old budgets, meeting minutes, annotated versions of the charter from back before the website even existed. He'd been sitting on this mountain of quiet protest for years, too scared to say anything out loud, but too principled to throw it away. I asked if he'd be willing to go on record. At first, he hesitated, said he had grandkids, a mortgage, didn't want to get dragged into neighborhood drama, but then he said something that stuck with me. "If you're brave enough to do something with it, I'll back you." That was all I needed. Next, I reached out to Mitch, the neighbor across the street, the one who'd brought me the warning letter a few weeks back and told me it felt like targeted shaming. He didn't even hesitate, told me he always had a bad feeling about Karen but never had the evidence to fight her. Then came the part I dreaded. The documents. I'm not a lawyer. I fix HVAC systems for a living. But I can read, and I can build systems. So I built a timeline, lined up the original charter, the fake updates on the website, the dates the rules changed, the fines issued after those changes, the incidents with other neighbors, the photos. I built a case, piece by piece, like I was wiring up a whole house cooling system. And when I had enough, I went full dad mode. I printed everything out, old school, on paper, bound it in a black folder, labeled each section. I even added tabs. Not because I thought it looked professional, but because I wanted it to feel real, tangible, like the kind of thing you can't ignore or click away from. I wanted whoever saw it to feel the weight of it in their hands. Then I called a lawyer, not the friend of a friend this time. I found a real HOA litigation attorney from the next county over, someone who didn't live in our neighborhood, didn't have any ties to Karen, and had a reputation for punching up. I emailed her a summary of the situation, just a few paragraphs and a scanned page from the real charter. She replied the same day. "Let's talk." That call changed everything. She was sharp, asked all the right questions, understood exactly what was at stake. And the best part? She confirmed what I already suspected. If what you're showing me is accurate, they've not only violated their own charter, they may have opened themselves up to legal liability. Music. 2. My ears. She laid out a strategy, file a formal complaint with the city clerk's office, request an investigation into the HOA's documentation practices, and, if necessary, pursue civil action for damages and misrepresentation. She even mentioned the possibility of forcing a vote to dissolve or restructure the current board. I'll be honest, part of me was scared. I mean, who the hell was I? Just a guy trying to keep his kids cool in the summer. And now I was about to take on the entire homeowners association and the woman who ruled it like a petty suburban dictator? But you reach a point where backing down feels worse than the fallout, where the idea of living under someone else's thumb makes your skin crawl more than the thought of a courtroom or a stack of legal fees. I wasn't just fighting for me anymore. I was fighting for everyone who'd been bullied, silenced, or gaslit into thinking they were the problem. Karen wanted quiet. I was about to get loud. I didn't kick the door down. I didn't storm into the HOA office waving my folder like a sword. That would have felt good, sure, but I wanted something better than drama. I wanted results. So I started quiet. Strategic. First move? That formal complaint to the city clerk's office. My lawyer helped to draft it. We didn't accuse anyone of criminal fraud, yet we just laid out the facts. The discrepancies between the published rules and the original charter. The lack of voting records for the changes. The clear pattern of enforcement based on documents that had no legal standing. It wasn't even about the pool anymore. Not really. I mean, yeah, that's where it started, but by the time I was stuffing the packet into the Dropbox at City Hall, it felt like something bigger. Like I was trying to pop a blister that had been festering for years. And that's when things got messy. Because the second the HOA caught wind of the complaint, they didn't just sit back. They came out swinging. It started with a letter, not to me, to everyone on our street. A lovely little flyer titled "Community Standards Under Threat," full of vague, ominous language about individuals spreading misinformation, attempts to dismantle the safety and order of our neighborhood, and my personal favorite, unsubstantiated attacks on volunteer board members. They didn't use my name, but come on, everyone knew who they were talking about. It was like a bad political ad. This summer, one man wants to destroy your HOA. Then came the emails. Neighbors started forwarding them to me. Blast messages from Karen, carefully worded but dripping with venom, talking about a coordinated effort to undermine long-standing community values, claiming that certain residents were endangering the integrity of our shared property investments. It was like watching someone spin a conspiracy in real time. She was trying to frame me as a threat, not just to the board, but to the neighborhood. She wanted people to fear what would happen if I got my way, if the rules stopped being enforced, if people could just do whatever they wanted, as if asking for a legal review of the charter was the first step toward turning the cul-de-sac into a war zone. But here's the thing about fear. It only works if people don't know the truth. So I got loud. Mitch helped me print out copies of the real charter and a short summary of everything Karen had changed. We called it the unofficial official guide to what the hell is actually going on. I dropped one in every mailbox on the block, added a link to a Dropbox folder with scanned documents and dated screenshots from the HOA website before and after the edits. Then I held a meeting. Not in secret, not underground, right out front on my lawn. 30 chairs. Cooler full of lemonade. Kids running around with sidewalk chalk. I even set up the busted pool as a prop, duct tape and all. Like Exhibit A in the trial of suburban insanity. And you know what? People showed up. A lot of people, and neighbors I hadn't talked to in months. Folks who'd stopped waving at us. People who'd gotten their own warnings or fines or subtle little reminders from the HOA over the years. They listened. They asked questions. And when I showed them the documents, the side-by-sides of the old charter and Karen's edits, you could feel the air shift. That night, a neighbor named Lisa stood up and said, "Wait, so all those fines we paid last year were based on fake rules?" I didn't even have to answer. That was the moment I realized something had flipped. Karen didn't control the room anymore. She tried to strike back. The next morning, I got a formal letter accusing me of unauthorized use of HOA communication infrastructure, whatever the hell that means. They claimed I violated protocol by distributing legal interpretations without approval. It was laughable. My lawyer called it a scare tactic and told me to frame it as a souvenir. Then came the email from Jim. He'd found something. An old meeting agenda buried in his files where Karen had proposed updating language in the HOA documents. No vote, no sign-in sheet, just a handwritten note in the margin. We'll post a site once changes are finalized, by me. That was gold, proof that she'd acted alone. We added it to the complaint. By the time the city acknowledged our filing and confirmed they were opening a formal investigation, Karen was already in full-on spin mode. She called an emergency HOA meeting, open to the community, of course, but stacked the room with her loyalists, tried to paint me as a troublemaker, someone destabilizing a system that had worked for decades. But this time, she wasn't just dealing with me. She was dealing with neighbors who'd seen the truth for themselves. Mitch stood up and read from the original charter. Lisa brought her fine notice and asked for a refund. Jim, God bless him, stood up in front of everyone and said he was ashamed it had taken him this long to speak up. Karen looked like she was melting, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I didn't feel like I was on the defensive anymore. I wasn't asking them to let me keep a pool. I was showing them what had been stolen from all of us, and I wasn't done yet. It wasn't a protest or anything dramatic. No signs, no chants, no angry crowds blocking streets. But that next HOA meeting? It felt like something was cracking open. They booked the rec center again, like always. Same stale coffee, same stack of folding chairs, same laminated agenda on the folding table up front like we were prepping for a bake sale instead of unraveling a fraud. But this time, the energy in the room was different. Buzzing. Sharp. People showed up early, and not just the usual HOA faithful either. New faces, families with kids, retirees, the guy who always wore gym shorts no matter the weather. People who never had time for this kind of thing but suddenly did. I sat in the back at first, just listening. Karen kicked things off with her usual robotic smile and thank you all for being here to continue preserving the integrity of our neighborhood. She tried to act like this was business as usual, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't been exposed. But the moment she opened the floor to questions, it all came loose. First it was Lisa. She raised her hand, stood up, and held out one of the printouts I'd made, the side-by-side of the original charter versus the edited one on the HOA site. I paid 2 fines last year based on these so-called updated rules. Can you explain why they're not in the official version on file with the county? Karen blinked, said something about language modernization and internal administrative formatting. She tried to brush it off. Then Jim stood up. Not only did he confirm that no vote had ever taken place, he read aloud from the meeting agenda where Karen had handwritten her intent to post the changes herself, without board approval. The room got quiet after that. Heavy quiet, not angry yet, not shouting. Just that thick air when everyone starts realizing they've been played. Karen tried to regain control. She stammered something about protecting the spirit of the community and preventing disorder. She said rules have to evolve with time, and not every change requires formal ratification. Then someone in the back, some guy I didn't even know, said, "Yeah? That's what dictators say." And boom, that was it. The room cracked. People started talking over each other, asking about their own fines, their own violations, the letters they got, the plants they were told to remove, the paint colors they were forced to change, all of it. Every little wound they'd been carrying for months or years suddenly spilled out in real time. And Karen? She just froze. She tried to bang the little gavel they keep on the table. Yeah, they really have one, like we're in Congress or something. But nobody cared. It didn't mean anything anymore, because once people see the man behind the curtain, they don't go back to pretending he's a wizard. Eventually, someone called for a vote to suspend the current board pending an internal audit. Karen tried to argue that it was procedurally invalid, but Jim reminded everyone that the real charter allowed for emergency motions by simple majority in an open meeting. Hands went up. A lot of them. And just like that, the motion passed. Karen looked like she couldn't decide whether to cry or throw the gavel at someone. She stood there, red-faced, breathing heavy like she'd just run a mile uphill in heels. Then she turned to the woman sitting beside her, some longtime friend or loyalist, and mumbled something under her breath before grabbing her binder and walking out. No speech, no apology, no dramatic exit, just a stiff back and a door swinging shut behind her. The next day, the HOA website went offline. Not under maintenance, not archived, just gone. By the end of the week, the city's administrative board had confirmed receipt of the documentation from my lawyer. A formal review of HOA operations was now on the books, and Karen Whitmore was officially under investigation for procedural misconduct and falsification of community governance materials. That's a fancy way of saying she's toast. Oh, and the best part? I got a letter. Not from the HOA. Well, not really. It came from the temporary acting board while the investigation was happening. Hand-signed. They voided all my fines. All of them. And included a refund check, not just for the ones I hadn't paid yet, but for everything going back to the first violation. Ashley framed the damn thing. It's hanging in the laundry room. And yeah, the pool's still up. Same one. Held together with duct tape and spite. Best summer we've ever had. These days, things are quiet. Not the fake kind of quiet. The kind Karen used to chase, where everything looked perfect on the outside, but underneath was just tension and people, too, afraid to say what they really thought. This quiet is different. It's real. The kind where folks wave again when they walk their dogs. The kind where neighbors bring each other tomatoes from their garden and talk about stuff like weather and football instead of violation notices and fines. The board's been restructured. Jim stepped down after helping guide the transition, and honestly, he deserved a break. The new folks seem more grounded. A couple younger people got involved. One guy's a mechanic. One woman runs a bakery out of her home. They've already started reviewing the rules, trying to bring them back to something that makes sense, something that actually serves the people living here instead of controlling them. Funny thing is, I haven't gone back to any more meetings. Not because I'm avoiding them, I just don't need to. Other voices stepped in. The weight of speaking up doesn't sit only on my shoulders anymore, and man, that feels good. As for Karen, word is she moved out. Sold the house to a young couple with 2 toddlers and a trampoline. I haven't met them yet, but I like them already. Last I heard, she left without a goodbye. No explanation, no farewell speech. Just gone. And you know what? I don't hate her. Not really. I don't forgive her either. Let's not get carried away. But I understand now how someone can fall into that kind of control, especially when nobody holds them in check. Give someone just enough power and a title to feel important, and before long they're rewriting the rules to make sure they stay that way. She built a little empire out of fine print and fear, and for a while it worked, until it didn't. The pool? Still up. Still the same patched-up, sun-faded frame. It's a little lopsided now, and the filter wheezes like an asthmatic hamster, but it holds water, and the kids still love it. We never replaced it with anything fancier. Didn't need to. That thing became more than a pool for us. It was a reminder of how something small can grow into something big, of how one stupid, overreaching rule woke me up in the middle of a very normal life and made me realize I could either keep my head down or stand the hell up. I still get emails from folks, some in our neighborhood, some from other states, people who read what happened and want to know how to fight back against their own little Karens. I try to answer when I can, not with legal advice or anything like that, just a reminder that they're not crazy, that what's happening to them is real, and that if you dig deep enough, you'll almost always find the truth under the nonsense. Sometimes, all it takes is one pissed-off dad with a folder full of receipts and a backyard full of soggy kids. So yeah, that's the story. Not how I thought the summer would go, but it turned out all right. We sit out on the porch now when it gets cool in the evenings. Ashley reads, the kids chase lightning bugs, and I sip something cold while listening to the water slosh around that wonky old pool. It sounds like peace. And God, it was worth the fight.